Hey folks, Tom here. Due to a variety of circumstances, mostly me losing my voice, we don't have a new Why Not episode ready for you today. We figure if you're going to listen to us regale you with the team's adventures under the pen of James D. Hudnall, it should at least be a pleasant thing to listen to. Instead, we're bringing a little something out from behind the Patreon paywall and sharing our conversation on the 2005 film V for Vendetta, and a little bit about the graphic novel. We put up movie conversations, general musings, frankly a host of ephemera on the Patreon, and have a good bit slated to hit the summer and beyond, so if this is of interest to you, or you need more of our voices in your life, maybe sign up and buy us a coffee. In the next week, there will be an episode on the Bruce Willis classic, Hudson Hawk, the things I watch because Chris asks me to. With all that said, we invite you on this Memorial Day to remember the 5th of November. And we'll be back with more Alpha Flight in a couple of weeks.
Hi everybody, welcome to our newly renamed series, Why Not Watch a Movie? I'm your host, Chris Baker.
And I'm your other host, Tom Flynn.
Today, we're going to be talking about that classic comic book movie, V for Vendetta, which was released, let me look this up, Tom, December 11th, 2005. That was almost exactly 20 years ago.
Yeah, we were recording this Thanksgiving week, U.S. Thanksgiving week, so we're literally, 3 weeks away from December 11th? Oh my God, 20 years.
Yeah, it did not feel like that long, but then I think, oh yeah, I remember going to the Watchmen midnight showing, and then I'm like, oh, that was 2009. Oh my God.
Yeah, I mean, I was 5 years away from having children at that point.
I had one on the way. I knew that one was on the way when this movie came out.
Woof. Oh. So that's hopefully the last moment of us feeling like a couple of just absolute old desiccated men in this episode. But
I am ready for the urn, Tom.
Who knows?
Anyway, we're talking about V for Vendetta because, well, it's unfortunately still relevant. Is that the term?
Evergreen? Maybe evergreen is the way to put it. That sounds so chipper and uplifting. It's evergreen, the consistent fight against fascism. It's just
Actually, I will pick a nit on that one, but I'll do that later because that's one of my big picture ideas. So the way we normally do these, we'll start with the actors, we'll move on to music, and then we'll do the fun stuff because generally between talking about the actors and the music, we end up talking about fun stuff. So in case you didn't know, V was played by the actor Hugo Weaving, who you may remember as Agent Smith from the Matrix movies. Or you may have seen it, you may have not, I don't know.
Or as Elrond in the Lord of the Ring movies.
Every time I watch those, I have to say Elrond Hubbard.
Jesus. Yeah, Hugo Weaving was on quite the tear in the early 2000s. Something. We've made jokes about how I'm creating some sort of weird universe of movies because everything we talk about is somehow linked back together.
Oh, yeah, from being in the early 2000s.
Well, I mean, that's part of it, sure, but there are some very odd actor overlaps. In this case, the one that really brings that home is that our good buddy, James Purefoy, was originally cast as V, but dropped out after 6 weeks. So, yeah, that's right. We still are tying back into A Knight's Tale. We're still tying back into so many things. I have a sickness, people. I have a sickness.
Maybe we'll have to get James Purefoy on the show.
I think that'd be actually really interesting. He went off. He was played Mark Antony in the Rome series that HBO did, and there's a great interview with him and Kevin McKidd, who was the lead in that show, where I think it was James Purefoy was the one that was absolutely going off about Game of Thrones and how they got fucked because they learned all these great lessons in making Rome and then just applied them to Game of Thrones, and it should have been. It's so delicious in how accurate it is, but also how whiny it is. It's so good.
Look, when you're the B team, you can't whine about being on the B team. You just have to do your damn best.
Well, it's I think
being the B team.
I think in fairness, it's hard when you're pretty much told and are the A team only to discover later that, nah, man, you weren't even the B team. You were the warm up. like you're not even on the bench. Like you're
yeah. The LOTR movies are the A team, and then Game of Thrones is the B team.
Yeah. Probably.
Yeah,
that's a real.
That makes sense to me.
But moving on through the cast, we have the co-lead Natalie Portman as
no,
Edie
not
Hammond.
co-lead. She's the she got top billing for this movie.
In terms of how the movie plays out, yes, she is absolutely the lead.
He's a protagonist, but not necessarily the star.
I would say that's an excellent way of putting it.
Thank you,
Natalie Portman, who. I mean, there's one movie of hers that we keep talking about that we'll never actually do a proper episode on, which is Leon the Professional.
Which is, Wikipedia mentions in V for Vendetta that Natalie Portman's character is somewhat reminiscent of her character from Leon, and there are some elements there. She's a little older, so it definitely makes it a little more comfortable.
I'm not 100% on that one.
It's a superficial read.
It's a very superficial read. I can see it as a superficial read. But yeah, Natalie Portman, who I believe is
she's our age,
my age or your age? Yeah, like right in there.
Right in there.
Yeah,
it's been delightful seeing her do stuff as we've been growing up, and I always think, oh, that woman is my age, and look at what she's doing, and I'm playing Guitar Hero. You know.
There is that. But
by all accounts, she's delightful as a person, and I have enjoyed just about everything I've seen her in that wasn't Thor 2 The Dark World, which I tried watching last week. And
you know what?
It's worse than I remember it, Tom.
And that isn't her fault. I'm not even sure.
No.
I'm not even sure it's any of the actors' faults. I think it's just a bad movie, and it's a bad plot.
The parts that don't involve the dark elves are just as good as what you remember from the first Thor movie. You know, like there's no downgrade there of that. It's just this dark elf stuff and putting it all into this other language. Choices were made, Tom.
Choices were indeed made. Moving right along, we have Stephen Ray as Chief Inspector Finch. Did you recognize Stephen Ray at all?
I feel like he's one of the, hey, it's that guy to me, but I don't really know him.
So he is an Irish actor born in Northern Ireland. He is best known probably for the movie The Crying Game, which was the subject of early memes in the 90s, where he's playing a British soldier trying to infiltrate an IRA group. There's a transgender character. There's a lot going on there. Stephen Ray also, though, I don't believe they're still married. They may be, but his wife and the mother of his children was a member of the Provisional IRA, Dolores. And interestingly, given some of the conversation that takes place in V for Vendetta, almost died during a hunger strike while she was in prison. So Stephen Ray's bringing. If you want to pick at this movie, and I don't know that you have to, but if you want to pick a little bit deeper within this movie, at different elements of it, there are some really interesting casting choices and thematic choices made. I think more interesting than the movie might get credit for.
It sounds like he brought some real emotion to what it was that was going on, and the hard clamp down confliction that we see growing through the movie from him sounds like there's some authentic stuff going on behind the dark of his eyes, you know.
We then have Stephen Fry as Gordon Dietrich, who, I mean, I guess
he was great.
I guess we can go into a little bit about what the characters do, but we'll probably just do that as we chat.
Everybody's seen this movie,
yeah.
Tom.
Stephen Fry is fantastic, always great. It's interesting to see him so young here. I mean, it's not like he's especially old, but this is him. Well, hell, I think he's probably around. No, he's a bit older than us, even at this point. But he just looks so much younger than in recent appearances. Obviously, it's a thing.
And I thought his character was well done, and the focus on the media ecosystem that it's not focus, I guess. The assumption of you picking up what they're throwing down about the media ecosystem is interesting because in Britain, is that how we refer to it?
Yes.
Okay, so in the Britain that they're showing, there's one channel, you know, like it's so much smaller. And even in America at the same time, you could not have exercised that level of control over the media simply because of the size of it. And hey, Tom, I get to drop a book on you. There's a book called Nothing is True and Everything is Possible, written by a Russian expat who his parents boogied out in the 90s, and then he came back in like 2000, 2001 to Russia to work in media, making television shows. So he was working in media, and he said the only way that you can conceive of the Russian nation is through the media, because this is a country that spans 11 time zones and has a dozen languages spoken in it, and none of these people have anything in common with each other other than the fact that they live in a political territory that's called Russia, and they get the same media. And so that's why the Russian media has always been so very centrally controlled and pushing things out, is because that's how it works to keep this thing together. But, you know, to do it at that type of scale, it requires doing things that Americans would find difficult to accept. This message brought to you from 2015.
I want to alter the order of how you've laid out the cast, because I want to jump to...
This is how Wikipedia laid it out, and
Sure.
I was shocked at them putting in the order of some of these.
Well, I think there's some emotional components to it that make sense. But I want to jump to Roger Allam as Louis Prothero. I looked into a bit. You know, a lot of these actors you would recognize from if you watch any British TV, they've shown up on your screen at some point. But what I think is interesting about Roger Allam and putting him next to the Stephen Fry character is Gordon Dietrich, Stephen Fry's character, is a late night host on this one channel.
He's Sean Hannity.
No, Louis Prothero is Hannity. Gordon Dietrich, Stephen Fry's character,
sorry, is Stephen Colbert.
Is much more of a Colbert type, you know, in terms of modern analogs. But what's interesting is Prothero as a Hannity, and even more like just pure mask off version of Hannity in some respects. But they physically look so similar. They're probably the most similar looking actors in this entire movie, and I think that's a really smart choice of that sort of Janus-like thing, right? Like they are doing the same thing, but they're doing very different things at the same time and serving very different functions within the society, until one of them, Dietrich, pushes it entirely too far.
It also shows how authoritarian governments like people straight out of central casting.
Exactly.
That you get promoted to this because you look at the role and you fit the role.
Well, and also, I mean, they are both relative, like not overly tall, but like, you know, like tall-ish, thick men with full head of hair, dark hair, obviously white, because there are like the only people of color we see in this movie are during a roundup scene. It is this depiction of both health and a certain notion of wealth, because they're a little bit on the stockier side because they're well fed.
And a bit of paunch,
a paunch, but not pushing into like an idea of obesity. Like there's just a lot of messaging taking place in putting these two actors in these two specific roles. Moving right along to John Hurt as Chancellor Adam Sutler. John Hurt is one of the great actors, but again, if you want to push into this a bit, you know what major movie about totalitarianism John Hurt starred in, right?
I have to confess that no, I do not, Tom.
He played the lead in the movie version of 1984.
Oh, well. Yeah, full circle for him there.
And now he is the figure on screen at all times, looking into everyone's living room, talking about all sorts of insane thoughts.
I bet for the people who grew up with that, which would probably mean the English people, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I bet that would be a nice full turn type of thing, kind of like the guy who played Austin Powers' boss was the same actor who was in Logan's Run. He was Logan.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna hate myself for not remembering. Give me 1 second.
Yeah. Well, we weren't planning on talking about that.
Yeah, but I should know that.
Like seeing him come full circle.
Michael York. Yeah.
But yeah, when you see people from this one thing and then you drop them over here into this other one, it helps to connect it up when you're in tune with that. Like I find when I watch movies with my kids and I'm like, oh, this is really interesting to see this actor doing this, because I know that 15 years later they're going to do this other thing and it's really cool to see it start or whatever. And they don't care. My middleist yells at me for narrating movies, but with narration that has nothing to do with the actual movie itself.
I mean, I think that's a reasonable thing to get yelled at for.
Oh, that's why we do these, because I try to get it out into here.
Yeah. All right, I think we can race through a few of these. I'm just going to stop at one or two of them. Tim Pickett-Smith as Peter Creedy, who's the head.
Oh, he has piggy eyes, too. That's a horrible name for a guy with piggy eyes like that.
I've seen other images of him where less so. I think he was leaning into it.
Okay.
Rupert Graves as Detective Sergeant Dominic Stone, which
Yeah,
Finch's
why is he
assistant.
listed above Prothero in Wikipedia? Because I was like, who? That guy had like 8 lines.
Well, he has far more screen time. Also, in the comic, that character has a far more important role.
Yeah, mea culpa, listeners. I have not read these comics. This is one of my blind spots.
You would enjoy it. I may make you and Ned read them and then talk about it. And Rupert Graves, folks probably recognize as Lestrade from the recent Sherlock BBC production with what's his name, Benedict Cumberbatch. We move on to Ben Miles as Roger Dascombe, head of the TV network.
Forgettable.
And frankly, that's kind of been Ben Miles's career. Like, he's in a lot of things, and he was
deliciously weaselly. Like he got that across in his limited time.
His range is weaselly to seductive. He's a handsome dude, so that's not shocking. But yeah, I like Ben Miles. He shows up a lot. He actually shows up in the director James McTeague's next film. I think it's his next one, Ninja Assassin, as a Interpol officer. Moving along to Sinead Cusack as Dr. Delia Surridge, coroner and also the head of the camp that created V. Sinead Cusack has long career. Also been married to Jeremy Irons for like 40 years, something like that.
Wow.
Yeah. Natasha Whiteman as Valerie Page, the letter writer. We'll get into this once we get into.
Oh man, that whole section could have been its own short film. It was amazing.
Yeah. The younger version of her is played by Imogen Poots, who is in a lot of other movies. Quite a good actress. And then John Standing as Bishop Anthony Lilliman. Again,
yeah, he's there.
He's kind of there. And also, just to get into it, this is directed by James McTeague, an Australian filmmaker. He has had a long association with the Wachowskis, who were the producers of this film.
This all came together during the sequels for The Matrix being filmed.
Yes.
Because McTeague was an assistant director on that. And so they were able to, sitting around shooting the shit, hammer this out.
And if anyone has like the pull to get a British comic from the 80s about fascism and anarchy by the notoriously difficult Alan Moore, if anyone has the juice to get that property up onto screens, it was definitely the Wachowskis at that time.
You said juice to get a movie made. It says that Joel Silver acquired the rights to both V for Vendetta and Watchmen in 1988. So somebody was looking to do this for quite some time.
I mean, Joel Silver is a longtime producer, has made a lot of stuff. But that's the sort of thing where you buy the rights, and then if someone wants to make it, then they bring you on.
They have to come to you.
They come to you, right? So, I mean, Joel Silver thought of this as a straight up superhero movie because that's how Joel Silver sees the world. But
didn't he do Batman and Robin?
You're thinking about Joel Schumacher as the director.
Yeah. Excuse me. My mistake.
I just, there's so many things in this head that shouldn't really be there.
Now I'm looking up the Joel Silver filmography because I'm curious. Xanadu.
Yeah, I mean, look.
Holy jeez. This guy made everything. He made Hudson Hawk.
You're around long enough. You make some great ones. You make some not so great ones. You make some cult ones. But yeah, he's made everything. Romeo Must Die in the Lethal Weapon series, importantly.
Oh, he brought us Swordfish, so thanks, Joel.
The Last Boy Scout.
The 2 Matrix sequels. Yeah. House of Wax. I remember that because I was working at Family Video when it came out, and there was like a whole wall of those DVDs.
$20 says he has something to do with X versus Sever.
Oh, Jesus. There's one. That's a movie we're going to have to do, Tom. Listeners, in case you don't know, the movie Ballistic X versus Sever, Tom had come to visit me during summer break in college, and we were painfully hungover. So we stumbled into the Family Video, rented a movie, and this was out, and we thought it looked like a good action movie, and we stumbled back home, and we watched it, and it is, to this day, the worst movie I have ever seen in my life.
It's really bad. Like, there's an excellent chance that Battlefield Earth, which I've also seen, is better than this movie.
No, I've seen them both. It is better than this movie. It is just so terrible. It is famous. Whenever somebody says, what's the worst movie you've ever said? And I say that one, people are always like, I've never even seen that. Or they've seen it and they say, yes, you're absolutely right. This is a fucking train wreck.
we're going to get off of this train in just a moment. But it stars Antonio Banderas, Lucy Liu, Greg Henry is in it. Ray Park, Darth Maul is in it. Talissa Soto is in it. She played Katana in Mortal Kombat, amongst other things. Joel Silver was not involved in this movie, near as I can tell. And man, that's a feather in his cap for not touching that one.
As far as music for this one, it's a weird kind of soundtrack. It doesn't have the traditional songs that we would be referring to. The 1812 Overture, and was it Beethoven's Fifth? Was that the other one?
I believe so, yes.
But that wasn't on the official soundtrack, but it was used in the thing.
It's interesting going to the track listing for the soundtrack, because I recognize that a lot of these, like the songs, like there's a Lou Reed song performed by Cat Power, Crime
Yakety
River,
Sax, a classic.
Yakety Sax. There are a lot of songs on here. I would not have thought of them though as being part of the soundtrack, the same way as say the Crow soundtrack works.
Correct. Yeah.
It's much more of an orchestral movie. It's fascinating using the 1812 Overture. I mean, so the 1812 Overture is so deeply ingrained in American culture around the 4th of July and all that. It was written by Tchaikovsky about the Russian defeat of the French. Yet it has been absorbed and consumed by the U.S. such that you put it in a movie taking place in a dystopian version of Britain, and it's really recognizable to U.S. audiences as being a joyful celebration of freedom. Right? I think that's just an interesting sort of thread you could pull at.
And you mentioned that the songs didn't feel like a soundtrack, and yet there were identifiably commercial songs by people. They used The Girl from Ipanema in one of the breakfast scenes, but they felt like it was more incidental, and it wasn't trying to convey. It wasn't trying to hit you over the head with it the way that the Crow did.
Well, it was a different kind of thematic approach, right? I mean, these were songs that people were playing as part of their everyday life. It was the song on the radio, and while making breakfast, or V hitting a song on the jukebox. It has a different feel to it. Although it accomplishes something very similar to what the songs in The Crow were accomplishing. It's a different flavor, a different approach, I guess. And it works very well for what the movie is doing. It creates a very naturalistic vibe to it.
Yeah, it doesn't try to pull you out because you're in this other world, and it's not pulling you out into your world with music that came out since their world diverged from ours. Which I guess leads us into plot and theme stuff at that point, because the way that the world diverged from ours had to do with a pandemic and political response to it.
In the graphic novel, it's actually a nuclear war that leads to this shift. I may be misremembering some element of this. I haven't read the graphic novel in some time. However, there was a fierce debate in the 80s in the UK about keeping nuclear weapons in the UK, US nuclear weapons. And there was a push to get them forced out and sent basically tell the US to get them off of UK land. In the graphic novel, that's successful. And that's why Britain doesn't get nailed, because there are no nuclear silos, nuclear bases there to hit.
That's why there's no external threat or discussion at all about what's going on outside the country. Everybody's inward looking in this whole film.
Right. And in the graphic novel, I mean, there are massive food shortages, which is still in effect.
It kind of referenced here.
It is a reflection on a wartime, like post-war Britain, where, rationing was still in effect, all of these things. But the reason that Britain doesn't get wiped off the face of the map is they don't have nukes on the island.
And that seems to be a very big change here between the books and the movie, because, make sure I have this right, the pandemic was created in order for them to cure it as a false flag terror attack.
That is what they suggest, yes. And now there are wars taking place.
But it's not nailed down, It feels like it's more suggested.
It's left open. I mean, one of the interesting things about this movie is that it plays with conspiracy and how conspiracy can cut in every possible direction politically. Like, who can make use of it for what purpose, and what does the conspiracy do? So, as Detective Finch looks into things and starts to, because he's a smart man,
he's a detective. This is what he does.
hypothesize what is possible, what could have been done, what could have taken place. He comes to the idea that it's possible that everything is interconnected in this investigation of this terrorist V, and that the government, his government, that he knows very well, would absolutely have committed a false flag attack in order to solidify its control. Now, this is against the backdrop of a U.S. that isn't seemingly, at least from the news reports we're given, and again, how much can you trust what they're actually telling you, in the midst of a civil war, in the midst of various versions of food shortage, that the continent is on fire to, that pretty much everywhere is fighting itself at once, which, shit, feels a little too on the nose these days.
20 years later.
20 years later. Fucking Wachowskis.
I think I responded to the plot point of the pandemic much more viscerally now than I did when I first saw this, or even any of the other times that I've seen it.
I mean, obviously, we've lived through one at this point. We've also had children during that entire experience, and Evie's brother is one of the kids that dies in one of these attacks or one of these outbreaks, whichever it is, or whatever combination thereof. But also don't discount how much conspiracy has, look, the US has always been a nation of conspiracies and conspiratorial thought. I mean, it was founded by a conspiracy to overthrow its, distant government, right? Like, that's woven into our fabric, but it's become even more pronounced, since, 2020. Even more pronounced, honestly, even more pronounced since Obama was elected. I mean, it's been a hot shot into the veins of the U.S. that there are conspiracies upon conspiracies upon conspiracies controlling and altering and fucking with you. And that will obviously hit us even more in media that we consumed in 2005 and probably again in 2010 and probably again in 2015 and probably again in 2020. And now we are our fifth or sixth watch, however many times. And it feels like it's speaking to this moment even more profoundly.
There's like 6 things I want to pick up from what you just said, because they're all interesting. I think that the nature of the disease being a terrorist attack that was released in certain places is a difference in kind from what we experienced of a naturally developing pandemic. Although I feel like, despite being different like that, having experienced something in that territory makes me feel more certainly that, yeah, people could respond like that. That, like, when something like this happens, when there's a disease that can spread, and whether it's been released intentionally, the bat lab and whatever over in China, there's always going to be a description of a naturally occurring one as having been intentionally done. But either way, you still have that same base fear of something invisible that I cannot fight against is coming to kill me and my kids. Mm-hmm. And that type of terror is how people hand over their freedoms. And I know I sound like an anti-masker demanding to go to Applebee's again, but you understand, or I understand that better now on this side of 2020 than I did before.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, one of the things that makes so much of the political discourse hard at this point, or has hardened things, is that a lot of the reaction against the anti-mask, anti-vaxxers was as much based off of people's fear of the unknown. Like, those who were more willing to trust the CDC and the government had a real visceral emotional response to those who were not, because you're part of the problem. You're part of the reason why we're still fucking stuck inside, where they're saying, no, they're the reason we're stuck inside. So, I mean, it's a unwillingness and it's a natural human response to pick a side, pick a belief structure, and then have a really fucking hard time with those who are going against that belief structure, against that side, for whatever the reasons might be. And that's me giving a charitable reading to certain elements of the anti-mask, anti-vax movement. Actually, I'll get an anti-mask. Fuck the anti-vaxxers. That's just science. I'm sorry. Fuck you. Like, let's move on with our day.
To pick up on your point about conspiracy being baked into things, I remember hearing, I think it was an episode Behind the Bastards, perhaps, but apparently the book Behold a Pale Horse, one of the classic conspiracy-minded books, was one of the books that was, like, left in prisons. And so you've only got like 8 books. There's only a couple paperbacks, but that was one of the books that was apparently really common to find in prisons in the 80s and early 90s, such that it influenced the people who were predominantly making up the prison population in the 80s and early 90s, which is why Wu-Tang Clan and a lot of those classic rappers, a lot of that conspiracy stuff woven in through everything they got going on. And once you understand this key component that connects it, you can be like, oh shit, one book can really, it's like a drop of ink in a cup of water, like you drop it in there and it spreads everywhere and you can't get rid of it anymore.
That's absolutely what we needed, was to inject that straight into the 1%er Aryan Brotherhood, the more violent elements of the Crips and Bloods. We just really needed all of those folks who just don't like each other to begin with, but have some real agreement, some real points of agreement when it comes to that sort of conspiracy.
It's like the Tom Hanks skit about the white guy on Black Jeopardy.
Oh my God.
He's like, that's how they get you.
Well, I mean, yeah, fuck. Great.
I remember my dad sending me that clip and he was like, I am uncomfortable about how accurate this is. Because he was that character, because he found himself wrapping back around to, well, shit.
Someday we're going to need to have like a little bit of a game of things that your dad would or would not say, and me trying to guess. Because, folks, I've never met the man. I've heard a lot about him over the years. I cannot place what he is or where he is anywhere on any map. Like, physically, politically, religious, I couldn't tell. Chris could tell me that he's undergone some sort of bizarre like biohacking, and I just have to be like, okay, like it wouldn't alter my perspective on him because I don't know what to think.
The biohacking is pretty far, because normally I just say, well, he's a Messianic Jew who learned Hebrew in his 60s.
You would think that would help.
You'd think that'd be the weirdest thing.
But it doesn't, because once you start factoring in some other elements of it, you're like, well, how did none of this makes any sense, God damn it. So anyway.
Well, we like to leave a little bit of mystery. Back to my long list of things that you had kicked off. When you mentioned about Evie's brother dying of the pandemic, I specifically made a note there to say, when she says, my parents became political after that, the way that she uses the word political, it was an incredibly nuanced way of doing that, because that is how people talk about it. That even today, right now, like my 17-year-old daughter uses the word political like she uses it here. The only people who are political are people who are angry and yelling and not trying to help anything. And politics is just something that people argue over. It's not an actual important thing. All politics is people looking for an opportunity to fight because they're quarrelsome, because they're not team players, because they want to make trouble. Politics is making trouble, in the way that she uses that word, and the way that whole society built itself around making sure that everyone understood this is what politics means now, because this is no longer a system by which we come to consensus and we make decisions that are affected for the whole group. No. The government does that for us. Politics is when people don't like what the government is doing. And that is really dangerous. And I mean, this movie doesn't have an algorithm that is pushing everyone towards being more extreme and more out there. And the observation is still worth having. It's good to be reminded in this modern day, you cannot ignore politics, because it's not just Sean Hannity yelling about something on his radio show. It's real stuff. This is how people come together, because politics is the alternative to violence.
It is possible to not have politics in this particular Britain, because there is the monoculture. Because on top of seizing power, they also purged. It isn't just a question of it being a racist political force. It is also homophobic. It is against anything that is not cis heteronormative. It believes firmly,
and not because they hold that as a value, but because they find the stability of that easier for them to exploit, because the people in that mode generally don't cause as many problems as these other folks.
I think what you find in the course of the movie is that the Chancellor almost certainly is a true believer. He just happens to be a true believer that is very good at that end of power. They dovetail together very well, whereas the others in the organization, like Creedy specifically, get that.
Oh, I enjoyed watching that motherfucker die.
Yeah, get that power requires violence, and the more violent you are, the better you can control things until you can't, which is the point that V gets to, that you can only push it so far, and no matter what, it's still a government, and therefore there's a compact. And once the government starts to violate the compact, that's when the people are much more likely to push back if they've been properly primed, which is what V is doing throughout the movie.
Yeah, with the year countdown and the way that whole, I was fascinated once again by just the way that somebody said, I am going to make these changes. Here is what we're going to do, and we're going to use the people to make that change, because I don't actually have to do that much. You blow up 1 or 2 buildings, and by golly, if you do it with the right way, with the right panache, with the right story, you change the world. And this was more about Osama bin Laden than about anything else. You know what I mean? Because he blew up 2 buildings and changed the entire goddamn world and brought America to its knees.
You know that the French philosopher Baudrillard is one of the touchstones for the Matrix movies, right? His notion of simulacrum. And Baudrillard wrote quite a bit about 9/11. I mean, like, if you want a master class in media studies, read Marshall McLuhan and then watch everything the Wachowskis have had a hand in. They understand it in a way that very few professors of media studies actually get.
You know, I know one of those. We could have a talk about that.
Yeah, don't introduce it like that, because then they'll be pissed. But I think there's also an interesting element to this of, and this is just me like throwing a random idea out there, speculating, because that's what we do on this particular series. I think it isn't just a question of how long it took V to get all of the ducks in a row to pull this off. I think there's also a time component to this. He needed this to be past the initial stages of the takeover. Like, once the takeover happened, once it was successful, he needed time. He needed society to ossify. He needed folks to get used to it, so that when there is the shock of the new, it isn't the same shock. It isn't coming on top of the shock of the outbreak. It isn't coming on top of the shock of people disappearing from street corners. It needed to be 10 years on, so that everyone's used to this sort of static, never-changing society, such that the government itself will have lost its edge. It won't know how to respond the same way. It will make mistakes, like starting to push out all sorts of news reports. About a third of the way through, they decide that they really need to push back against what V's doing. So they start putting out various news programs about how terrible it is everywhere else. And the movie does a very smart thing of going back to specific families, going back to a specific pub, and people watching the TV. Oh, that
poor little girl. Man, she popped up in the first, single digits of the movie, and I saw that girl sitting with her family. I was like, oh, that poor little girl.
Yeah. Yeah, that's not gonna turn out well.
We both have 12, 13-year-old daughters, Uh-huh. It's hard to watch that one, because I also know that in that society, one of my daughters would have been at that age spray painting a V over the thing.
Yep.
Just like that kid, and not with any radical, crazy intent of tearing down the government, just being a kid looking at the world around her and saying, hey, something's got to change, and this guy seems to want to do it.
Yep, because that's what kids do. I mean, that's also the other element, is that you need children having grown up under the heel of this, some of whom will have been perfectly happy to go along with it because their place in society allows for it, but a lot of them being like, well, what the hell else is there for me?
And I really think this time and ossifying point is fascinating. And I thank you for bringing it up, because I hadn't really thought about it in those terms. But what you need are those girls' parents.
Yep.
Who remember a time before this, and they are realizing here that their daughter literally does not understand a different way of this being. And then when this pops up, some of the parents will say, you know what, honey, you're right. That it used to be different, and this is how things used to be, and it was cool, and I missed that part of this. And then other parents will say, you have to listen to authority, and there's no reason to listen to these people. They're just troublemakers trying to be political. And not every kid's going to respond to that. A lot of them will, unfortunately.
Well, sure.
But having those parents and that experience and how those parents share it, because until, V starts kicking this shit off, it's not safe to talk to your kids about what you miss and about what you remember and how things could be different.
Well, it's also not safe to even consider it. I mean, a lot of folks will simply make, they've made the choice. They gave up the rights. They're making their way through the world. They're just trying to, put food on the table, raise their kid, etc. The moment that V comes in like a virus, like a disease vector, a new disease vector to completely upset and throw off this social order is the moment that a lot of these folks will have the opportunity, the first time in a very long time, to think about, well, what did I trade away? And if they can't stop this clown in a mask from blowing up buildings and, changing everything and threatening to do more, and they can't find him, and on and on and on and on, then what did I give all that up for in the first place?
This movie hammers home writ large the point of what's the difference between a villain and a supervillain? Presentation.
Not bad.
By the way, folks, that's from Megamind. If you haven't watched it, I strongly recommend it, because Despicable Me should not have become the famous villain-turned-hero animated franchise. It's only those fucking minions that made it so that Despicable Me won. Megamind is by far the better film. I unironically love Megamind.
All right, then.
In fact, I will often greet my children with Olo, which is his idiosyncratic version of hello. Olo. I'm sorry, where were we? We were talking about super serial stuff.
I wanted to, again, back to the whole media studies element of it. And I think this is fun to have the Wachowskis interacting with Alan Moore, who also understands, Alan Moore is a genius, full stop.
He is every bit the genius he claims to be.
Yeah, he actually is.
I say the same about Prince, actually.
It's scary. That's actually probably the air that those two should be occupying, in terms of people's opinion of them, and equally their opinions of themselves.
I'm now imagining Alan Moore in the ruffled blouse and the high heels and the velour suit.
No, just imagine Alan Moore as he usually dresses, like a fucking wizard, hanging out next to Prince the way Prince usually dresses. And look, just imagine that. It goes together. They fit. They work. Okay?
They look like an adorable couple from Bushwick.
Yeah, actually. I was just thinking of the recent memes of Trump the day after hanging out with Mamdani, dressing completely wearing an overcoat and a scarf in a way that he's never worn before, and just
looked good on him. I have to say.
Well, it's a good look. Anyway,
it's hard to mess with that look.
I wanted to just kind of circle or kind of talk a little bit about V, and I think your point about presentation is an interesting one. The fact that
that's his whole plan.
Well, but also this movie opens with a
history lesson.
A history lesson, because it's history that the folks in the U.S. won't have.
This is when I learned about it.
Which is whereas the folks in the UK absolutely will know, because they still celebrate Guy Fawkes Day, where they burn him in effigy on November 5th. Because, yeah, that's dark.
Who would the big American enemy be? Because, Benedict Arnold doesn't have that kind of pull,
Well, the thing is
Kissinger?
Hopefully one day. I would probably argue it would be John Wilkes Booth, except that he was successful. And the point about Guy Fawkes...
And a lot of people really like him still.
The reason that doesn't work with Guy Fawkes is that Guy Fawkes' gunpowder plot failed. But it's interesting to use a character from British history that is culturally reviled as someone who tried to completely destroy the government as it existed as part of a religious pushback on top of a political pushback, to then use that presentation as the hero, person, force, terrorist who is once again trying to upset the society, but maybe it's a version of British society that should be upset. Maybe.
You know who the American version is, Tom? One Mr. John Brown.
Oh.
Look at the John Brown gun clubs.
That's interesting.
That's what we're talking about. The confluence of politics, religion, actually killing people, and being reviled in your time and all that stuff, and then being brought back and being used as a way of validating and recapturing the exact energy that he was trying to bring through history. Yeah, that's a John Brown gun club.
That is exactly it. That is a really good pull. There was doing some light research, Moore did at one point say that he wanted to use Guy Fawkes specifically because of the culture's tendency to take villains and turn them into heroes, and how that's just sort of a thing in modern mass culture. Which,
yeah, I'm not a fan generally.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think
I say as I praise Megamind. You know what I mean?
I don't think it that often works well, but I think it's an interesting perspective for him to be attacking this from. Man, the John Brown one's kind of thrown me because that's actually really,
yeah, it's fun to chew on.
Really. Possibly perfect as the comic.
I do love the bumper sticker that I don't argue with people that John Brown would have shot. I don't have it on my car.
I was going to say.
I'm glad that it exists.
I'm glad it's out there in the world.
It's too many words, otherwise I would embroider it. Because that would make a great patch, wouldn't it?
That would be a really good
patch.
Actually,
a really big as shit patch.
You should turn it into just the an acronym, just the first letters of each word in it. Kind of like the whole that argument over Wizard of Oz, that meme of two brothers screaming at each other about the Wizard of Oz.
I don't think I know that.
I've shared this to you before, and it's become, you know what? Our listeners will know what the hell I'm talking about. And if they don't, then
we will all point and laugh at you, Tom.
Yeah, that's fair.
Back to the media studies and whatnot, and the way the media is presented. I think where I found this movie the most compelling was when the plot was not being used. The stuff that V brings about the high-mindedness and whatnot, and I'm not saying the whole third act it's good because it pulls the plot together and ties it together, but the vignettes in between that give you the emotional stakes and the stuff that's going on, those are the best parts of this movie. And then once you get V and the stuff that happened back at the lab and all these things, and his Deadpool moment of emerging from the flames, and I didn't care about that part nearly as much as I cared about everything else that was going on with it. And one of the things that hit me the hardest and pulled me the most out of being compelled by the movie was every time that the Arch Chancellor was on the screen. Because when he was doing the big 1984 on the screen and never being there in person, it really is hammering home a very specific and very British version of what totalitarianism looks like. And it is all based in 1984. And that 1984 backdrop imagery, and I understand how it is helpful to the setting of what's going on here, but I found that to be the most heavy-handed and least accurate stuff in the movie, because that's not how authoritarianism actually works. I know I'm using totalitarianism and authoritarianism interchangeably here, and I'm sorry, Professor Jones. That specific version of it being so very tied in with the Englishness, I'm repeating myself, and I'm sorry, but it doesn't work. Like, that's not what it looks like now. That's not what it looked like in 2005 either.
What do you mean by that precisely?
The figurehead of the government being physically isolated and kept away, and then only appearing through the screen, even to his subordinates. I mean, I guess Putin probably does that, but that's not our experience of how that works. Maybe the hidden away part, but like, I don't know. This is the least formed of my thoughts about this, but there was something there that just felt thinner and more pastiched, put together so that you don't look beyond the set dressing. I think the set dressing point is the right one. I think in terms of the Britishness of it, that is why you have Lewis Prothero. That's also why you have a Dietrich. Like, there is a very strong vein in British culture of those sorts of hosts. I mean, that's also true in American culture, let's be clear. But the media figures... Sean Hannity and Stephen Colbert, Johnny Carson.
Peter Jennings, Tom Brokaw. Like, you can just keep going down the line of who's trusted, all that. I think it's a flaw in this as a movie is there isn't more time to kind of delve into it. And there's very little that we see of the chancellor actually directly addressing the public. It's almost always through newscasters, whatever the new story is, the idea that they're trying to get across. But that's also true of the various people he's speaking to. It's not like the head of the finger, Creedy, is really pushing out there or front and center. Like the control mechanism of this government is kind of hidden back. The only time we really see the chancellor engaging with folks and like in public is in a flashback as during his rise to power. And I gotta tell you, just as an aside, I think it was probably the third time we saw him on screen and it started to do a close up on his teeth as he's speaking and all that. I got such strong Nigel Farage vibes in that moment. It was really upsetting. I was not happy about that. Future Prime Minister Nigel Farage, because the way the Labour government's going, that's 100% going to happen.
Yay!
Yeah, we're fucked.
Well, I think that the lack of depth for this aspect of the movie, look, this is an ambitious project.
Yeah.
There is a lot that is going on, and you can't dive into everything equally. And I felt like they just kind of took half the story and like drew a line down it and said, okay, look, this is where the government is. We're going to deal in this half, and we're just going to let the government be the line so that we don't dig into this other stuff, because this movie is already 2.5 hours long, which at the time was just crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. And also even more impressive that it kicked the shit out of Failure to Launch. That's exciting.
It's not impressive to kick the shit out of Matthew McConaughey.
Again,
at the box office.
At the box office.
I agree. Tom, you are correct. He is always in great shape.
But I mean, for instance, in the graphic novel, when Evie leaves V the first time or escapes, whatever, I forget how it works in the graphic novel, she actually like spends quite a bit of time living outside.
Yeah, and they showed that a bit in the movie, and it seemed like one of those container things.
But this is before the fake camp experience. She links up with a man. She falls in love, and he's running a black market ring of getting goods and whatnot into the UK,
as one does, and
he's eventually killed,
as one does.
And V grabs her before she's about to assassinate, if I remember correctly, like the head of the finger or something, because it was the finger that kills him. And that's when the whole fake camp experience kicks off. But in so doing, the comic was able to spend time kind of going even deeper into elements of the society and how it's working.
Because we don't really get that. We only get these incredibly high level positioned people, and then Evie and V cutting through all the rest of society to deal with these people. And then
the vignettes of everyday people and their experience.
That letter vignette is just, it's beautiful. Like, I was doing other stuff while I was watching this movie as homework, and I stopped. I sat down and I watched it, and I was like, oh my God, this is so close to happening right now.
Mm-hmm. And it's happened elsewhere before.
Correct. And it feels just as close now as it did in 2005, that this is a perpetual reminder that they will come for them in the night. And if they come for them in the night, they're going to come for you in the morning. And so if anybody's coming for anybody, you got to stop that, because it doesn't stop itself.
Because it can't stop, because the moment it stops is the moment.
Can't stop, won't stop.
Jesus. But I mean, again, onto the point of ossification, the moment that they stopped purging, the moment that they really stopped, the moment there was no longer a really good internal enemy is the moment that you have something like V that can be successful. Right? Like, that's the
because
moment
if he isn't successful, he becomes the actual enemy that unites everybody.
Blowing up buildings and killing members of the Finger is not going to piss off the majority of society the way that an attack on a school will change things. Although, fuck, man. I mean, we have school shootings every day, and that doesn't seem to... This movie is... we are doing our goddamnedest not to go into like a very dark spiral here. So
yeah, I think I last watched this movie in 2020. I did this, and I did Watchmen, and I did Idiocracy, because we all had a lot of time on our hands in 2020, and I have to say, I could not have picked a worse trilogy of movies to watch in 2020 than Watchmen, V for Vendetta, and Idiocracy, because I came out of that not okay. At one point, it was Chief Inspector Finch, I believe, who said, if our government was responsible for the death of 100,000 people, would you want to know? And I'm like, oh, that sounds so quaint. 100,000 people? Huh. I know that my current president is responsible for far more deaths than that of my fellow countrymen. And yet, here we are.
Chris wrote that note down, and I made the comment onto it to just add on, just setting aside the pandemic period. What Elon's done to USAID has conservatively killed this year 1 million people.
Yeah.
I mean, Jesus fucking Christ, people.
I thought it was really cool the way they had audio sweeps where they were literally listening into what people are talking about, because this is pre-social media. There's no algorithm track.
There's no iPhone yet.
I know. It's just right before the iPhone, and the whole world is different, you know?
It's one of those amazing things about like Brave New World. When Brave New World comes out, Huxley knows about genetics and is able to apply that. But then when he does Brave New World Revisited, it's because he basically is like, look, nukes hadn't happened yet. Nuclear power wasn't a thing. It's not that I missed it. It wasn't there yet. But I also feel like I missed it. So now I'm going to put it right back in there. So an updated V for Vendetta would be it's shocking how much closer 2005 was to 1985 or whenever V was done, mid 80s, than 2005 is to 2025. It is a completely different universe.
I would be very interested in an updated take on this story, even if it's not V for Vendetta. Because again, when you get bogged down in that 1984 aspect and all the things that made this such a classic in 1985 or whatever, like there's a reason all that stuff was built into the book by Moore, and all those ideas are really great and really awesome, but this is not the only way to present them. I feel like the inclusion of the 1984 imagery and whatnot, my complaints about Discworld adaptations are always that they're done by the Brits and that they are so fiercely defensive of, this is a British story. This is how we're going to be doing this. Ankh-Morpork is London, and nobody can ever tell us anything different. But when I read the book, I didn't know anything about Terry Pratchett when I read my first one. I had no idea this was supposed to be England. So in my head, Discworld looks totally different, whereas every time you see it put to screen, it always looks like an English production, and it has to be so very rooted in all of these quirky things, instead of being able to set that aside and saying, yes, we have these really quirky things, and it's really interesting to us, but there are bigger stories, topics, themes, and motifs here that resonate with everyone, and that's what makes this such a powerful thing, not the uniquely Britishness of it. And I'm not trying to come down hard, because every culture does that, but I think the Brits would do well to do a little more dilution of their stuff to allow for access to a wider audience who isn't as steeped in all of the British tradition of growing up with the BBC and Doctor Who and, all these shared cultural touchstones. And I think that taking that change to an updated V for Vendetta, you can have the totalitarian government, you can have the V character almost exactly like he is. Like, it's just the rest of the stuff around it and how it actually functions. I think that there is a way to do that in the modern world with modern technology being involved in the story that would be very, very satisfying, but also lose that very Alan Moore Britishness,
I think you can maintain elements of, certainly a lot of elements of the Britishness of it, because I think in a way this is, in some respects, a uniquely British kind of
fear. Well, because of 1984. Like, that's what makes it feel specifically British.
I think there is a DNA to it that it is very British. I do agree, though, there are ways to approach it that would strip some of that, or at least inflect it in such a way that you can tell a wider story to it. You did send me a link that HBO is developing a V for Vendetta series. And I think
yes, directed by Pete Jackson. Do note, not Peter Jackson. As in other contexts, it's an important R at the end of the word.
But also produced by James Gunn and Peter Safran, is that his name? Which is encouraging because, I mean, look, you want to think that James Gunn's always going to be, funny, goofy. And there are some very strong camp elements to V for Vendetta that are present in the comic and also certainly in the movie, which I think Gunn will hit. But I think what the thing that Gunn gets is how to translate to the screen. He understands what makes for compelling visuals, and I don't think it has to always be funny. And I don't think he thinks it always has to be funny. I think he gets the core. I mean,
we all saw Guardians 3. That movie was not funny.
Yeah, I didn't actually see that one.
I don't love the Guardians the way that other people do. I'm not here to crap on them, but it doesn't speak to me the way it does to other people. The soundtracks are great, though.
Yeah, I mean, they're important that way.
I was excited for the third movie when they opened up with Space Hog on the trailer. I do like the practice of having a weirdly covered song from the 90s as your trailer song. The Marvels did it with Intergalactic, which I still pull up that version from time to time because I enjoy the bombasticness of it. So
there are a few things that I want to just quickly run through before we wrap up. I want to just comment on how expressive the mask is. Like it's a static mask. It's a Guy Fawkes mask. You recognize it from Anonymous. You recognize it from all sorts of things. And yet somehow, because of the body control, Hugo Weaving's voice, you just get the emotion behind it, which it's just good acting. It's impressive that way.
One thing I appreciated about this watch through was the ability to turn on closed captions, because I would have greatly appreciated that in the theater. I did not always make out what it was he was saying with precision. But, that's me.
In the lead up to the third act, V constructs dominoes that he then triggers to.
Well, he's got time on his hands. He's just waiting now.
Absolutely. It gets across the notion of time and, deliberateness, but also it's such a Crow thing. Like that scene from The Crow has influenced so much, like that one scene. It's really fun that way. The camp that V is in, and we need to circle back before we finish to talk about the letter a little bit.
Man, I can talk about that scene for as long as you want to, Tom. It is just so gut-wrenching.
In the movie, Finch discovers what's going on at the Lark Hill camp through some records. In the comic, he actually visits it. And not only does he visit it, he visits it on acid. That is how Finch starts to pull together everything, is he has an intense acid trip and he starts to see all the connections and how everything comes together. And like, for instance, I don't think they really hit upon it in the movie, but the station that V's explosive train takes off from is Victoria Street Station. Everything is a V over and over and over again. And these people are so without imagination and so thoroughly just stuck in what their world is that they can't recognize that it's V.
Which is how Finch shows up at just the right place, because it's the one that starts with a V.
Exactly. So it's also media literacy.
It's V saying, "Come on, people, get with the story. There's a thing happening here. Let's do this."
It's V saying, "Read a book." Read
a book, read a motherfucking book, not the sports section, not a magazine, but a book, a motherfucking book. Yes, I had to finish it. Thank you.
Fair. In the comic, V disabled the entire surveillance system. He creates the land of do as you please. This was one of Moore's complaints about the movie, in particular, what he thought the movie would be. He claims to never watched it, which who knows? He's weird enough that could be true. But this is about anarchy, and it's not. His book is about anarchy, and the movie is not reflecting that, which is sort of true, sort of not.
No, I can see that critique. Yeah.
Although. And how much of the book do you want me to go into?
Go for it. Whatever you feel is appropriate here, friend.
The movie ends with Finch and Evie watching V's masterwork and watching the fall of this government, right? Finch is not present for that part. Evie becomes V at the end. She takes over. He's put her through physical training. She takes over the role, but she abducts Stone to eventually replace her. So the idea was to create an anarchic state, but you always needed a figure on the outside to keep it that way. You still needed someone to be present to push back on it, which is, there's theoretical anarchism, and then there's the how you would, practically put that into effect. And frequently it comes down to, yes, you can absolutely have anarchy, but you also need to have a system. Like, you still need to have a system.
There has to be a system of anarchy here.
Yes. Which I think is
systemic anarchy. I saw systemic anarchy open up for the Pixies back in 95. They were terrible. Tom, you have a note here that all the evil characters have too much hair, and that's kind of an Alan Moore thing. What does that say about Alan Moore?
I mean, what doesn't it say about Alan Moore? I think the last thing I want to say, I mean, we could literally go for 3 more hours. We could spend a lot of time talking about Lark Hill. We could spend a lot of time talking about the prison scene. There's just
he did not have to do that to her. The whole thing, it was uncomfortable and unpleasant, and he didn't have to do that.
It's done better in the comic, but even then it feels rough.
Like I said, I am interested in a take on this story that is not this story. And that's not a knock on this. It just feels like this one has been done a couple of times in a couple of different ways. I'll watch the TV show, or at least give it a try. And I look forward to seeing that. But I don't think that's going to be what I'm talking about, of a new take on this type of story.
The last thing I want to just mention is a line towards the end of the movie where V a couple times brings up that he's never danced with anyone to any of the music he plays in his jukebox. And before the denouement, he invites Evie back to his hideout, but asks her to dance with him. And what he says this is just, I think, amazing, an amazing line. A revolution without dancing is a revolution not worth having. And I think that really cuts to the core of this Shakespeare quoting, melodramatic, campy, brilliant idea of how do you overthrow fascism? How do you fight back against totalitarianism? How do you fight back against people who want to control you with fear? Joy. And I appreciate that.
Frogs together strong. And now I'm envisioning that scene where instead of the song that he plays, which I don't actually even know what song he plays, but you know those Instagram accounts where they say the music makes the whole scene different. Imagine if he played like Safety Dance. A revolution without dancing is not worth having.
That would be the James Gunn version. They would play the Safety Dance.
Well, thank you very much for joining us on this walk down memory lane as we feel just like the Crypt Keeper as we look back on 20 years of how things have not changed at all.
And, I was trying to get my eldest to watch this with me, and he was just resistant because he's being a teenager. I'm gonna conduct a little experiment, and maybe I'll let folks know how that goes, because I think if he watches it, he's gonna be like, well, when was this made? Well, that's just today. So that'd be interesting.
You might have a chance with the TV show.
Yep, there's that. But folks, thanks for listening in. Thanks for being a part of our Patreon. We really, really do appreciate it. And we will catch you
on the flip side.
On the flip side. Bye.
Bye, folks. Thanks.
Marching, charging feet, boy.